I'm so excited to have Robert Baker with us this week. He is a passionate advocate for DEI and had a 40-year career in global HR consulting. He now runs his own business advising organizations on attracting, retaining, and developing the best talent and building diverse teams. A key element of his focus is helping develop inclusive cultures and work environments. And he supports his clients in becoming employers of choice for diverse talent. He runs workshops, speaking events. I've interviewed him for books I've written before. He also coaches leaders on how to be true allies and put allyship into action in their organizations. Welcome, Robert. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Hey, Julia. Yeah, it's lovely to see you again. Really looking forward to our conversation.
So, male allyship, how the heck did you get into this line of work? How does one become a male allyship expert?
Oh, good Lord, it's a long story. But I think to be quite honest, it starts with women, right? Okay, because when I was at university, I worked with really super smart women, around me, and then when I got into the workplace, I realized that they weren't progressing as far or as fast as the men around them, and I was kind of thinking at one point, where are all the really super smart women in leadership, etc. And so in the company that I was in at the time. There was a lady trying to start a women's network, and I basically asked the question, well, how could I support it? Because I thought it was really important. If men supported the women's network, it was more likely to have greater impact, I thought, because there was a lot of men in the firm that I was working for. So yeah, so she signed me up basically, and actually the first thing we did was we changed the name of the women's network. We called it the Vine, so no one knew it was really a women's network. So that meant that men could come along and not feel embarrassed about coming to a women's network meeting, which was kind of the point. But because of that, I got headhunted to another women's network, one that I'm still involved with, actually very heavily today, called PWN Global, which the company I was working for at the time sponsored. So I became their first man on the board, and so I learned a lot from that of being, like the man in the minority, the challenges that women face, especially in the workplace, and so I was steeped very heavily early on, in a sense. This was like 15 years ago or more, in the challenges for women in the workplace, and really started to think about what men could do to support them, because men were in the majority in the positions of power, etc. So that was the kind of start, if you like, of my interest in male allyship. And then as time has gone on, I've seen that need increase really, and in fact actually now people are much more aware of the role that men can play as allies to women, and to everybody that doesn't have their level of power and privilege, and the fact that we can be allies to each other. So it's kind of broadened out a bit since then. But the other thing that's happened is I've also got more and more interested in what men are thinking about this, because
Mm.
what we've seen is the pushback from men that have felt that the focus on women was too great. Men suddenly felt, gosh, we're being left behind. I always remember reading the book, The End of Men, by Hannah Rosin. This was about 10 years ago, thinking, God, like, what does this mean for us? But even then, and then Michael Kimmel's early work was around,
Yeah.
angry white men, and you
Yeah.
realized actually that
You're
there was
taking
there
my
was
job, right? That's in his talk. Michael Kimmel is
yeah.
like, it's like, who said it was your job?
Yeah, exactly. So I realized that there was kind of already a lot of discontent, and then of course the impact of the internet, social media, influencers has only really expanded that. I mean, you and I were talking earlier about the Manosphere, for example, and there was a documentary with Louis Theroux, which I think you saw, and that caused a lot of discussion around me. On so what has happened, what are the influences on younger men and boys these days, what's happening when they get into the workplace and come into the workplace, what's happening with views, are we going backwards in the sense of men's views
Yeah, and
on
Robert, help our listeners that
equality?
haven't seen the documentary, or maybe I'm surprised by how many people haven't heard of the term manosphere. What does it mean?
Okay. Well, I guess Manosphere is kind of like an ecosystem of men who are out there on the internet and social media, who are basically, kind of selling a vision, if you like, to boys and men of what they need to be like. And in some senses, it had some merit in the sense of focusing on self-improvement, self-reliance, some actually not harmful things necessarily. But what we found is that some of the practitioners who actually became, pretty famous and influential, were then linking that into how you should treat women. and not treating women obviously in a good way at all. And so what we've seen now is that sort of message that that men need to control, they need to dominate women in their lives, etc. And so this manosphere is this whole ecosystem of people involved with. In the documentary that Louis Theroux made, he actually interviewed a number of these influencers in the US and also in Europe as well. And I mean, the shocking part was really the beliefs that they have, of how women should be treated, how men should be, in
Yeah,
those
I
particular
mean, I
values.
started out watching it like, oh, come on, this isn't real. And then you see influencer after influencer, and you go and see their social media accounts, and you're like, this is real, and they have millions of followers. And it
Yeah,
was
exactly. That was the
shocking.
yeah. Well, and that was kind of like one of the shocking things to me was the younger boys and men around them who thought these guys were heroes. And I thought, gosh, like I can't believe that people think these men are heroes because basically what they're doing is they're exploiting the loneliness, the misery
Yeah.
that younger boys and men can have because this is a difficult time actually for a lot of younger men in the world, and these guys have kind of filled the vacuum with this misogyny and with this and basically money making. They're selling university courses, they're selling things that you can follow to learn how to be a more dominant man and to be this sort of alpha male type. So yeah, it's a real concern, and I think together with the way the algorithms work on social media, uh, you get pushed content as very quickly in this space, and then that can be kind of what consumes you. So what we've seen is some pretty harmful effects, I think, on well children basically and young boys coming into manhood who really have their views very dramatically influenced by what they're seeing and
Yeah.
hearing.
And it,
Uh,
it,
uh,
it is, I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's just people that follow the manosphere. It's not a lot of people. It's just toxic masculinity. People that gravitate towards that are misogynists. It's like, I read some statistics on this, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was about 2/3 of young men are following an influencer that identifies with the manosphere. And that really disturbed me at my core because, like you, studying allyship and especially the role of men as allies over the years, I think we make this assumption in our work like things are just continuing to get better. And we
mm.
might be at the first point in my life and in modern day where we're going backwards somewhat. I mean, you could argue, a few steps forward, a few steps back. People have all these analogies for social movements, but this feels significant. Am I overreacting?
Well, no, you're not overreacting, I don't think. I think it's very significant. The question is, is it going to inevitably get worse, or can we find a way to challenge it, fight it, get back to where we probably need to get to? Um, and I think there is some sign that some of the younger men are kind of realizing, I think, enough messages getting through about, look, you're being exploited by these influencers, basically. They're
Right.
taking your money and they're giving you a dream or a way of approaching women, for example, that doesn't work. So you're going to find out the hard way that your money is not well spent. I think some of that messaging is getting through. I think plus also there are now more men saying, listen, we need to have better role models for boys and men. And there's some great work being done by Equimondo, for example, and others around the world who are trying to highlight that actually the kind of role models we need are men that care, for example, for their families, that care about being there for their kids, and who care about the relationships that they have with the women in their lives, for example, and who don't feel that they have to base their relationship with others on dominance and control. So I think there is some hope, but I think you're right. We've been at a very significant moment, and I think we're still in it. And
Yeah.
there is still a danger that things could get worse. But I also see some hopeful signs that we're starting to realize, we can't just let this go on. We've got to,
Yeah.
kind of push back against it.
And these things go through waves. I mean, 2017, Me Too, right, took
Yeah.
off. And we had a lot of data, early reporting on this. Even a year later, there was this backlash effect where men didn't feel comfortable being alone with women at work or having relationships like mentoring or sponsoring relationships. So it seemed to have caused more harm than good when that awareness think really did soak into the fabric of society, and people realized like this is wrong. Like we can't treat women this way. And I remember even my initial reaction was like, I've never had a moment like that. And then I'm like talking with women about their moments, like, oh, well, yeah, that happened to me too, but that wasn't, oh, that was a too moment. And you almost like get into your own self-denial. So this whole awareness that elevated. And then, of course, here in the US, we have these weird presidential cycles, and we're in
Mm,
another one of them where it's like
yeah.
all these explicit things that he has said towards women is now leader of our country and a very big world figure. You're like, well, if he can do it, then I think I worry about it gives men, you talk about that role modeling, it gives them permission to do it too. So there's these forces and this like, historical point that we're in right now that I just wonder if is somewhat of an inflection point that we need to kind of get these feelings out in the open to process it to move forward collectively better. I don't know what
Well,
you're
I
seeing.
think no, no, I think we certainly need to have conversations with men about where they are and where their thinking is. And that's certainly some of the work that I'm doing, to have, for example, an all male group around me talking about what their thoughts are about whether things have gone too far on gender equality, how they feel as men, how they feel they fit in, the permission that they feel to be able to be, sensitive, vulnerable, to be humble, all those things. Um, but I think one of the key things that I've been working on, over time is just growing that awareness for men that actually the world is a very different place for women,
Yeah.
and really appealing to the fact that they've got women in their lives that surely they care about, whether it's daughters, mothers, sisters, etc. I mean, one of the books I read early on, which really changed my mindset, was a book called Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates, when she basically just wrote a book based on an internet platform she'd set up that just recorded the incidents that women had of everyday sexism in their lives, whether it was being, kind of propositioned in a bar or wolf whistled by, a
Yeah.
construction worker or something. And she collected all of them. And as you were implying, like a lot of women saying, wow, that was me too. That happens to me as well. And I read the book. I remember asking my daughter, like who was in her mid-20s then, like, what did she make of this? She said, Dad, that happens to me every day. I just don't talk about it because it's so frequent, and it's like, wow, that's shocking, that's happening to young women like you, but
Mhm.
you don't feel that you've got anything you can do about it, and it's kind of like, wow, shocking. So I think it's that awareness for men that there is a very different world, and it comes down to things like, for example, on dark nights, women don't feel safe walking down certain streets that men feel safe,
I use that as
all
an
that stuff.
example a lot, Robert. Like that when I get the
Yeah,
feedback to workshops sometimes, like it's a hard time to be a man right now. And I don't want to discount that or
yeah,
persuade you otherwise. Like it's a hard time to be a human right now. You're right.
yeah.
And how do you feel in a parking garage alone at night? Like
Mm,
just reflect
mm,
on that. And that was something my husband, my partner, he's like, oh, Julie, you make a big deal about everything. Like, but just think about it. Like, think about me and your kids, your daughters in a parking garage, terrified at night. Like, do you feel that way? If you're being really honest, it's just a feeling you can't replicate, you can empathize with. And once you hear those collective stories like you did, Robert, it's like, oh, this is a thing. Like, I don't
mm,
experience this. And like, what if I could help with this? I think that's the click moment that we're hoping our allies get to. It's just getting them to it. It's like, how do you get them there? And I know you lead men's groups and organizations.
mm,
Like, if with the manosphere, like how do we reach these folks? Like I really struggle with this and like should we even bother? Like is there just a percentage of the population that just like they're not gonna want it, like can't want it for them? But I think most folks are somewhere in the middle where they're like, I want to
mm.
be I don't buy into this whole manosphere thing, but I am curious about it. I'm also curious about what I could do to be helpful. There's this like waffling
Yeah.
middle. I call them all sorts of things, magic middle, frozen middle, all sorts of most middle managers are like this in companies. Like maybe those are the reachable folks. I'm just curious. What do you think?
Uh, I think there's a lot of men out there that really do want to do something, and would feel good about themselves if they did something. But sometimes they don't always know what it is they can do, and also they're worried about sometimes acting in isolation. And one of the things I've been focused on is if you can be part of a community that's showing
Mhm.
up in a different way. If you're part of a community of men, for example, that are respectful towards women, who are going out of their way to make sure that the playing field is more level, then I think it's something that's going to be a lot easier. I think sometimes doing it on your own can be very challenging, and what we found is
Yeah.
one of the most challenging things is if one of your colleagues is exhibiting sexist behavior and demeaning women, individually speaking up about that is can be quite tough because you feel you're confronting that person. You're potentially they're going to feel somewhat put out that you're confronting them. So I think creating an environment where you say, look, here are the standards of behavior in our community, and we expect people to stick to those, and together we'll kind of police it in a way. We'll make sure
Yeah.
that we all stick to something that's very positive. And I think in companies, I think certainly there's that whole thing about yes, we need to have certain standards of behavior, respect for each other in an organization. Um, but we also, need male allies to sort of, speak up if they do see things that aren't right. And it could be something simple like a woman being talked over in a meeting, as simple as that. But it's not letting those things go. It's showing that actually we all believe that stuff has to be addressed. And I think that's one of the ways we'll get to making
Yeah.
some change.
Yeah. I love that positive peer pressure, a community, so you don't have to be the lone person calling in other people because I've had to be that person that calls people in on their unhelpful behavior, and it rarely goes well for me because the
Yeah.
person gets so defensive, and
Hmm.
and then I feel like I shouldn't have even said anything at all. It would have been better just to let it go. And, this is what we see with allyship right now inside organizations that didn't create an inclusive culture, but, told people that they needed to be individual heroes, sheroes, whatever we want to call them.
Mm.
And that's not helpful. Like, that's not sustainable. Like, that's putting a lot of pressure on folks. Like, if we create the inherent systems to be inclusive by default, then we don't have to rely on these individual efforts. I mean, of course, it's a both and, individuals need to hold people
Yeah.
accountable to the systemic behaviors and community guidelines. But I'm just wondering, Robert, I know you do a lot of work in Europe. And Europe's interesting right now. I love working with my European clients because they're like, whatever you all are doing over there, it's weird. Like, just we're gonna keep going. Like, you all are
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
But there's guidelines, like there are targets that organizations have to hit with their gender
Mm.
representation goals and pay equity that we don't have here in the US. Going
Hmm.
backwards on that one. So I'm curious, like, what is the state like in Europe around allyship and diversity and inclusion? What are you seeing?
Well, I think there's still quite a significant number of companies that believe that they need to have inclusive workplaces in order to attract and retain diverse talent because they believe the diverse talent brings the different ideas, the different perspectives. They believe that diverse teams are more innovative, etc. So I still talk to a lot of CEOs, business leaders who firmly believe in the value of having diverse talent and creating an environment where diverse talent can thrive. So that's kind of a good thing. And then the question is to think, okay, so how do we create an environment within our organization where that happens? We need to look at what the leaders are doing. And who are the leaders? Well, in fact, in the majority of cases, our leaders are men. So how do we engage them in making sure that they're part of this, and also address any concerns that they might have, like we were referring earlier, to the fact that if the playing field's being balanced and more leveled, then they don't feel that they're kind of missing out. So what I see in Europe is still a lot of focus on that, and the companies I'm working with, for example, are offering to their leaders, their male leaders, a chance to go on these workshops, where they can learn to be, more inclusive. They can learn to be better allies, and that's not just to women. That's kind of to everybody as well. So I think Europe still believes in this. I think or many companies in Europe still believe in it, and but they believe in it for business reasons because they believe that they're going to get better team performance. They think diverse teams are better, produce better results. So I still see a very strong lead from many companies in Europe.
Yeah. Well, and the labor shortages. I mean, it's hitting countries like Germany pretty hard. I mean, it's
Yeah,
hitting a lot of countries. It's going to hit the US too. It's like you're not going to have, the advantage of just having excess labor sitting around waiting,
yeah,
even with AI. We've talked a lot about how AI is replacing tasks, not necessarily jobs, and that could change in the
Mm,
future. I
hmm
know AI is something also a hot button issue, Robert, in our world around allyship
hmm
and gender. Um, this is another one where you're like, oh, if we don't put some parameters around this, like we could risk, losing or taking us backwards rather than forwards. I'm curious, the artificial intelligence, like what are you seeing with our work?
Well, I mean, certainly I'm seeing an even greater recognition that leaders need to enable equitable access to AI tools and also make sure that the systems and the processes that are used within the company that use AI are ones that create fair outcomes. And of course, we know there's a lot of bias inherent in algorithms and in AI systems because often they're trained on historic data, which is containing those biases. So I think I'm certainly seeing a recognition from leaders that yes, this is a role that they've got to play to make sure that things just don't happen. Because I think if we allow things just to unfold in an unconstrained way, what we typically find is that men will be pushing very hard to do all the sexy AI stuff and potentially elbowing others, including women, out of the way. And of course, and as we've seen from some of the surveys, that women are already saying, well, hang on a minute, can we really trust this AI? It's biased. It's also,
Mm.
is it ethically right? It uses up a lot of resources. Is this good for our planet? Kind of thing. There's a lot of
Yeah,
questions.
my
I
students
mean,
say that a lot. Like, I'm not doing
yeah,
something that's good for the environment. And I was like, oh, I didn't see that
yeah,
coming.
yeah. No. My son and daughter both said to me, like, Dad, I don't know why you're so obsessed with AI because it's actually it's bad for the planet. But the trouble is, of course, we're all in this like what's been called an arms race, right? When we're trying to get to
Right.
this point where we beat the competition, so we feel we have no choice but to jump in there. But I think yeah. So I think what I'm certainly seeing is the need to certainly empower people with AI in organizations, but to do it in a way that recognizes that there are some concerns and to facilitate that equal access and that equal opportunity with it.
Mhm.
So it's a very big discussion going on right now in companies, and of course, then what comes out is, well, what does allyship mean in that context? How can allies really support others? And part of that is being aware of the biases that there are in AI, and making sure that systems that are used either have a way of managing those biases out. Um, but also they're just kind of supportive of a wider approach, which is not this narrow, kind of performance overall
Mhm.
kind of approach. It's actually thinking, where does this really fit in? How do we get the best, balance between human and AI, sort of augmentation, as it were. So I think there's a lot of discussion going on right now about how companies implement and adopt AI and the role of leaders in making sure that it's done
Yeah.
fairly.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen so many different pieces on how AI could influence gender equality. And one, I mean, talking about the biases, even the bias of usage, when a woman uses AI versus when a man uses AI, it makes a man look smarter and a woman makes her look weaker. And it's like, that's so interesting, the same behavior, but it's similar to humor. And now humor, when men
Mm,
are funny at work, they're more likable. When women are funny, it's like less likable. It's just, we get kind of in these like gender conundrums almost. It's like, I can't win. Like, you want me to use AI, but now I use it. Now you think I'm being lazy or whatever. So I think that's interesting. I also saw some new research out about hey, how AI, because it's automated so many job tasks, it's easier to start businesses. And this is actually helping
mm,
women who
mm,
historically haven't had as much access to venture capital
yeah,
and fundraising. So all of these things have kind of a both and element. It's not doomsday, right? But I think it underscores a point you were talking about, like with the manosphere, the importance of relationships. We
yeah,
know that relationships are the singular number one correlated with human happiness. Like we're a social
mhm,
species, being in relationships, and that's just men, not just men, and
mm,
there's
mm,
women in
mm,
your life, to your point too, but also to AI and the human element to it. I think women are wonderful having a diverse team deciding your AI
mm,
policy and making sure it's inclusive and that it's looking at biases and it's giving guidance and use cases when it's appropriate and not appropriate. It would be great to have men and women and all genders around the table deciding. So
yeah,
all of these things, it's like distraction, distraction, distraction. There's just so many things where it's like whack-a-mole. But it all goes back to what we've talked about is the power of diverse teams. And if we have diverse
Hmm.
teams helping solve these problems, then we can do it. It's possible. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's like this. I always get in spun and like, is it the chicken, the egg, the egg, the chicken? Where do we start?
But there's an interesting question, isn't there, there about, kind of how we stereotype things and how we as humans have judgment and bias. And of course, AI was brought in a sense to kind of remove human bias, but then brings in a different kind of bias because it's trained on that historic data. But I was reading this study where the researcher basically generated through AI identical CVs or bios. You might have seen this, right?
Yeah.
And they just changed the names on the top of it and then gave them to people to interpret it. Would this person be good for a job in your organization? And like the difference in feedback, in terms of exactly the same bio, but people were treating the women's bio much more harshly than the men's bio, for example. So I thought, wow. So whatever we do with AI to try and remove biases, we still have a human bias,
Hmm.
which we've got to work on too. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know we've all done like shed loads of unconscious bias training,
Yeah.
but I wonder whether that's still something we have to kind of keep thinking about because if we
Yeah.
bring those biases into how we interpret stuff that AI produces, are we going to move forward in the way we need to? So, yeah,
Yeah.
very
And how
interesting
do we debias the
times.
systems that AI is supporting so that we don't, like by default, they're not biased, with especially with automation happening from AI that may not be as questioned as much. So interesting, Robert. Well, we could talk about all of these things forever. But in the interest of time today, I know, your work, you're very, very active doing this work. And so that gives me a lot of inspiration for the future. And at a time when you could be semi-retired, you're working long days, around the clock, literally around the world. And you're just
Yeah.
a great voice of reason. I wish we could multiply you everywhere. But tell our
Well, the
listeners,
good
like,
news is, so as I said, the good news is actually now when I look at it, I started doing this kind of work 15, 20 years ago. There's a lot more men in this space now, which is really encouraging to me.
yeah.
So sorry to interrupt there, but I think I just wanted to make that
No,
point that,
it's
I'm
true.
kind of being multiplied.
Yeah, well, you're creating the multipliers. And I think it's easy to think, we're slipping backwards, doomsday. And there is, a reality where we're not exactly advancing, at least here in the US, at the rate that I would like to see. And this is a moment. It's not
Yeah.
forever. It's a moment. And how we handle this moment, how leaders handle this moment, I just want people to know you will be remembered like,
Mm.
by how you behaved, especially in times where it was easy to misbehave. There will be some accountability, and not that, I hope that for anybody. I certainly hope we have good accountability, but there will be a resurgence of this work. There is still a lot of great work being done, to your point, and a lot of great community building. So it's important. Tell our listeners, how can they follow your work, Robert?
Well, I hang out on LinkedIn, so that's a good place to follow what I do. I will try and post some of the work that I'm doing there. I started Substack recently, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Is probably the best way, and I'd be very happy to share some of the work that I'm doing and give some of the insights that I'm seeing from it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love following Robert's work on LinkedIn. It's really powerful and really helpful. It's a good positive vibe in my feed. So I appreciate that, Robert. Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, Julie. Been really, really good talking to you.